Welcome to 2022 on the KrakCast, everybody. First episode of the new year. We took a long break to recharge our batteries. Josh, you feeling energized?
Yeah. I've been eating batteries nonstop.
It's just Josh and myself today because Dr. Mike, emphasis on Dr. Mike, is at home.
Dr. Vaccinated Mike.
Double vaccinated Mike is at home with, guess what? Yes, he's got the Rona. We talked to him yesterday. In fact, not to downplay the damage that it's done elsewhere, but Dr. Mike seems to be doing pretty well. He's enjoying himself. Is that going too far? I don't know.
Well, some of the photographs he posted on our
mixing drinks and just having got his feet up on the table watching TV. So he's. I
suppose they could have been like old. When I say old holiday slaps, I mean holiday snaps from a fortnight ago.
He's playing it up, I think. So well done, Dr. Mike. Paid time off work, and you get to hang out and have a little party at home. So. That's the coronavirus situation here. So the KrakCast finally directly impacted by this. We look forward to getting him back next week so he can tell us all about his own experience.
Report from the front line.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just the two of us, Josh, for the very first episode of 2022. Let's stay on the coronavirus issue for a moment because Dr. Mike happens to be in very good company because just a few days ago, the president of Poland, Andrzej Duda, despite being thrice vaccinated, double vaccinated and a booster, he got the coronavirus for the second time.
It sounds like a kind of a statement from some old kind of dusty tome from the Alexander. The thrice vaccinated Duda.
Thrice is a good word, yeah. All right. I don't know how we cannot make this political, but Andrzej Duda vaccinated 3 times. On top of that, the natural immunity that apparently comes with having been infected, which he was previously last year, and he still gets it. What does this tell us about vaccinations and, well, generally?
Well, I'm going to go off just very, very slightly on a tangent here because it is it's definitely pertinent, but in the British news this week, it was reported that Sir Keir Starmer, who's the leader of the Labour Party, the leader of the opposition, was once again self-isolating because he'd come up with a positive test. And the news reports then went on to say that this was now the third time that it was the third time that he'd had a positive test. It was the 6th time in the 2 years or so of the pandemic that he's had to self-isolate. And he's been
How many times? 6?
6. And he is, fully double jabbed and boosted. And, a lot of the articles then went on to say, well, look, it does really rather seem, and this is not to take a position on the effectiveness or the value of the vaccines per se, but that there are some people who are just, shall we say, damn unlucky and, will keep getting it over and over again. And there are some people who have been exposed
wait a second.
to most concentrated
I'm going to argue, I know it's a tiny sample size of 2 people, but I'm going to argue, illustrate the example, rather, that you gave, this Labour Party leader in Britain and Andrzej Duda, both politicians. Every day for them is full of meetings with God knows how many different people. They're extremely active, in terms of socially and whatnot, moving around a lot of people moving through their offices. Atypical, highly, highly atypical, in other words. An average person doesn't come into contact with as many people as they do on a regular basis, shaking hands, speaking to them, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe there's something about being a politician or being a public figure, let's say, that dramatically increases your chances for getting sick, even if you are thrice vaccinated and already infected and everything else.
Well, yeah, and I think also there's a thing that, it's, now kind of like acknowledged and understood that the vaccine does not prevent you from contracting the virus. What it does do is substantially reduce the damage that it can do to you. Right. Yeah, you're much less likely to be hospitalized, et cetera, et cetera.
Die. Yeah. I wonder what this does to Duda's credibility now on the subject of the coronavirus, because just imagine, again, he's vaccinated 3 times and he's still got it. How does he go on television, for example, and encourage people to get the vaccination when it's so easy to say, shut the fuck up, dude. You got it 3 times and you still got it. So why do you want me to get it?
Well, I don't have a convincing answer.
I don't know how he has any credibility now.
But I mean, the other
through
thing,
no fault of his own, by the way, just the way it is.
I mean, also there's the thing that, as far as I'm aware, he's not unwell. I mean, he doesn't have any symptoms as such. I mean, it's just that he's failed or he's got I never know if it's positive or negative, but he got the wrong result in the test, so he has the lurgy within him. And so, therefore, has to, step back for a few days. And
if anything, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm missing something here. If there's another angle to this, but if anything, Duda and people like him, people who've been vaccinated twice, 3 times, and still get it, they are a bullet in the arsenal of the people who are critical of the whole vaccination scheme. Well, yeah, right. So. Again, how does he kind of, come out publicly and take the lead to encourage people to get vaccinated or to take various precautions? I think this kind of makes him shut up on the whole subject because, again, 3 vaccinations, he still got it. So how does he encourage other people? Well, I think
that, and this is kind of a global issue, really. There's been this sense that everyone should be treated the same. So there was, right from the very beginning, there wasn't really a policy that said, look, we can identify... Well, even when they did identify like vulnerable groups, like the over 75s or people who were, obese or diabetics or whatever, there's never been a universal plan to just specifically focus on protecting those people. It's always been rather a kind of it has to be the same for everybody, and I'm not sure that with looking retrospectively that's necessarily the best tactic, because it's meant, I mean, there's the discussion about this current variant, which does seem to be vastly more contagious, but at the same time, hospital admissions or serious hospital admissions are way down compared to the Delta variant, which was causing problems last year. And so one wonders if you're going to keep catching something that either doesn't make you ill at all or only makes you like a little bit ill for a few days, sniffles, runny nose and everything, sounds awfully like what we've been dealing with for our whole lives, which is that every winter there's a bit of a chance you might get a cold. And colds are extremely infectious, but generally speaking, except for the very old and very vulnerable, people do not die of colds.
Well, we wish President Duda the best, and hopefully both he and Dr. Mike will be back to a regular, normal, and healthy schedule as soon as possible. So fingers crossed for President Duda. Let's move on to the other big story that was everywhere over the holiday break, over our break between Christmas and
because we've had such a long break, you've probably completely forgotten about it.
We were off for like almost 3 weeks, and that is the drama surrounding the manager of the Polish men's national football team. Sousa, Paulo Sousa.
He composed the Monty Python theme, didn't he?
Wrong Sousa.
Oh no, the wrong Sousa. Yeah.
So Paulo Sousa took the job at the beginning of 2021. Took over the Polish men's national team, led them to a mediocre record. They're in the process of maybe sort of qualifying for the Qatar the Gutter World Cup. But just around Christmas holidays, I forgot the exact day. Was it just before Christmas? We learned in a shock surprise development that he wanted to quit in order to accept the job as manager at a professional club in Brazil called Flamengo, which is a massive club there in South America.
Flamengo do Rio.
Yeah. A massive club. So he wants to quit. Came as a shock to everybody in the football establishment, fans, observers, everybody, and just feel betrayed. Really, I mean, Poland's in the middle of preparation for these what are they called? These knockout
playoff qualifiers.
Playoffs qualifiers against Russia and Sweden. Russia and Sweden, big matches determine whether or not they qualify for the cup. And here we go with this distracting drama from a guy who's under contract who wants to walk away to take this, managing job in Brazil. Opinion immediately split. Some people saying, okay, fine, fuck off, go. We didn't want you anyway. Get the hell out. There's other people saying, well, how can you do this? You're under contract. This is when we need stability. You're undermining, you're really ruining everything. There was a strange twist when it looked for a moment that the job was going to be filled by someone else. Apparently, Sousa was Flamengo's second choice, and their first choice became available for a moment. So it looked like he was going to be left out, hanging to dry. But as it turns out, he everything kind of the road to Flamingo opened up for him, and he had to go through the process of working out a deal with the Polish Football Authority about how much money he had to return. In the end, it's about €1 million, I think, 3-point-something million zlotys.
I mean, of course,
quite a bit of money.
He will be paid handsomely by his new employer.
He's going to come out ahead for sure. But again,
had he been stranded in the Atlantic Ocean,
that would have been
metaphorically
hilarious. Actually,
then he would have been like 100.
So
like
tell me, Josh,
euro.
what do you? I don't know quite so much about this as you do, but when it comes to being the manager of a national team versus being the manager of, let's say, a very prestigious club team, which do you think kind of ranks higher in the world of elite?
It's a good question.
Managers?
I mean, I've kind of chewed over this one, and I think. Probably, if it's a prestigious club, that's higher. I think it would be reversed possibly if it's your own national team that if you are a national, like we have with England at the moment. So I said we, like Gareth Southgate, who's the England manager, is an English man. So. I can see that for him that really is like kind of, if you like, the pinnacle of achievement in football. But I mean, if he was managing, I don't know, San Marino.
Well, let's say Poland is a second tier, but they're not an elite country, but they're hardly the bottom level country either. So does that have some bearing on it? Are you better off?
I think it does. Yes. I mean. Poland is one of those footballing nations that kind of sits in that sort of uneasy hinterland. They really don't have. Well, I know that you've got into this in detail in previous shows, but I mean, they don't actually have much to show for their footballing exploits over the decades. No. A third place finish in a couple of World Cups, which is. Not shabby, but I mean,
it was also 40 years ago, so 40 plus years ago.
Yeah. But nevertheless, there's definitely, there's obviously one world-class player in the current squad, and, there's a good handful of, like top-tier professionals who are playing in various clubs around Europe.
Maybe it was a culture fit. Paulo Sousa himself, he's Portuguese, and Brazil, I know Brazil is a different country, I'm well aware of that. However, there's obviously a strong Portuguese connection, let's say cultural connection. You're probably much more comfortable as a Portuguese person in Brazil than you would be in Poland, for example. Maybe he thought, greater opportunity for glory, maybe at a club like Flamingo, and just, I don't know, any number of possible reasons. But the fact that, again, he's under contract, and at this sensitive time especially, he doesn't walk away from this looking very good at all.
No, I also think it's an interesting, we routinely hear about football clubs sacking managers and then having to, pay them vast amounts of money to get them out the door. And so it is quite interesting to see that when a manager kind of decides that he's had enough and he's got a better offer elsewhere, that, there are also mechanisms in place to say, well, okay, if you really, really, really want to leave, then, you're contracted for this period of time and this is the value of the contract. So, cough up the difference.
So the position is open if you want to apply, Josh. There's speculation that a former manager, Adam Nawałka, will kind of return to the role and kind of take over again. There's also, let me get your take on this real quick. We've seen it's called PZPN, which is the Polish Football Authority. They've gone through the process several times over the last decade or so of having to find a new manager. And there's always this argument about having a Polish manager versus a foreign manager, the virtues, the advantages, disadvantages of both. And I get the feeling that there's something of an inferiority complex in the football establishment that kind of leads them to look out. Like there's always somebody better somewhere else, from somewhere else, and they're not satisfied with the talent pool here in Poland. As you mentioned earlier, England has an English manager now, but they have, in the recent past, they've had a Swedish manager, for example, right? They've had an Italian manager. To what extent do you think nationality plays a role when a national FA is looking for a new manager?
Well, I mean, I was going to make exactly that point about, England's recent history until the appointment of Gareth Southgate. I think the last England manager was the slightly farcical appointment attempted appointment of Terry Venables, which goes back to the 90s, I think. My memory's not so good. But yeah, we've had kind of like Fabio Capello and Sven-Goran Eriksson are the two big names of the last couple of decades. What you want from a top coach is the ability to wring the very best out of what's hopefully a pool of talented players. And I think the fear in Poland, I mean, like no Polish club side has really achieved very much in international competition.
Since Wisła Krakow about 15 years ago, I think they made it to a knockout stage of Champions League.
But that's
long time ago.
Yeah, and that's not that fantastic.
Yeah, true. It's true.
So there isn't anyone really with the experience of dealing with that.
But what I mean, though, what do you think about, again, nationality? Let's say, the Polish talent pool is what it is, and there's probably somebody a little bit better from the Netherlands, from Germany, from Argentina, some kind of, prestigious footballing background. But for cultural reasons and for language reasons, maybe the intangibles, things you can't really measure, it's the Polish team would be better off having a Polish coach. Is there something to that, or do you think in this day and age, we're kind of past that?
Well, I mean, of course, because we covered this, there's the slightly amusing situation of a recently recruited member of the Polish national team who plays for Aston Villa.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Cash.
Matty Cash, yeah. And, the kind of snide observations, including from me, that he probably doesn't speak any Polish whatsoever, apart from, the handful of Polish words.
That's true. And in fact, if you're playing for a national team, that probably means you play professionally at a club somewhere, which almost certainly you speak English at a reasonable level.
Yes, I was going to interrupt. I don't know the exact figures, but I mean, I think that probably a good half of the national squad play outside of Poland. Whether it's in Germany. Or
I think it's more than half. Yeah,
quite possibly so. And
actually, I think it might be 100%. I have to check on that, but I think it might be like literally every single one.
I mean, in which case, you have the real situation that if you appoint a domestic coach who doesn't have any experience of managing teams outside of Poland, then he's going to have to try and manage and coach a team of players who have a lot of experience of playing football in clubs like, whether it's Borussia Dortmund or, Bayern Munich or Aston Villa or Brighton Hove Albion or Southampton, another one, or AC Milan or Juventus. These are really, well, okay, with apologies to Brighton, but most of these are really, big, prestigious clubs, and there's going to be a cosmopolitan atmosphere in there. They're going to be hanging out their regular teammates of people from all around the world. And then to kind of play for the national team, and you all kind of pitch up together. I mean, I know it's not like a squalid little Nissen hut at the end of a rainy, muddy, semi-ploughed field. And of course, the facilities in this country are very good. But I think there's still the sense that, you want someone who's got a position on the international stage.
I'll be curious to see who they hire, obviously, but I think they're going to go with a Polish guy just because they feel stung, like betrayed by what happened. It's just feel like they touched the stove and they got burned.
It's like
they won't go back.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Thanks for the for the brief employment, guys. But
right.
There's something better now.
Exactly. I think it'll be a while before they go back to a foreign coach, but could be wrong. But we'll see. Let's move on. The 1st of January, about a week ago, marked the, lots of new laws and changes coming into the Polish legal system, from price increases to basically everything, to our topic in this story, which is new fines and penalties for road traffic violations, which is always a big deal in Poland. Poland has a notoriously poor safety record on its roads across the country. And these new, much, much higher fines are meant to, in some way, do something about that. Penalties for excessive speeding. One of the new rules we have now is if you're caught going more than 50 kilometers an hour over the posted speed, you automatically lose your license for 3 months. whereas previously it was a fine of whatever, a couple of hundred zlotys. Now speeding...
Tusk got lucky then, didn't he?
Speeding,
Just missed
all
that
Polish politicians have a problem with driving lately. But, all speeding fines, I said Polish fine. All speeding fines can now reach the thousands of zlotys. I mean, like serious money now.
30,000, isn't it?
Like a lot.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's going to have an impact, we won't know until next year, and we can look at the stats. But we did learn that in 2021, just in Małopolska, just in our region, that the police took away 4,000 driver's licenses. That's, call it 11 every day for speeding related offenses. That's just in Małopolska. That was last year under more relaxed, lenient penalties and regulations. We'll see. Again, we'll see what impact it has this year, but
there's some slight good news in all of that, though, isn't there?
What is it?
Which was that the deaths on the road figures for 2021 were.
They were down. About 140 something people died on the nation. I mean, it's better than the year before, but it's kind of within the normal variation you would expect from year to year. It didn't look like a significant drop.
Well, of course, I mean, I think, and again, this is maybe more of a deal in the cities, but I mean, the big change, of course, was this adjustment to the law about pedestrian crossings. And I've been quite pleasantly surprised, actually, how quickly, certainly in Krakow, drivers have adapted to that, and that actually you can hover near a zebra crossing, and people generally slow down.
I think I've said this before. I always think that most drivers are actually quite good in the city about.
Of course, you can't actually get up much speed in the first place.
Well, exactly. They're never out of second gear, and they're waiting in traffic anyway. So it's not like you're really interrupting them. My contention has always been, and this was confirmed again over the Christmas holidays a couple of weeks ago when I had the occasion to drive on the death road that is the Autostrada, going east-west from here east to Tarnów and west to Katowice and so forth. What is it, the A4? I always forget.
Yeah.
A4. So this is where we need to concentrate. If we're really serious about cracking down on road safety, the attention is always focused on city driving. And like you said, zebra crossings and, respecting that. Okay, that's fine. But it's on the Autostrada where it's the Wild West. I drove from here to Tarnów and back, did not see a single police car, right? And it's the same thing. I've said this many times before, but it's always true. Either there's somebody in the right lane going 90 kilometers an hour in their old Daewoo Tico or Fiat Panda or whatever the hell, or it's a guy, again, I've said it before, I'll say it again, in an older BMW or a newer Audi in the left lane going 160 or 170 kilometers an hour, 1 meter behind you, flashing his lights maniacally and leaning on his horn, asking you or telling you to get out of the way. That is the experience on the Polish roads. It's one extreme to the other. It is full of people who are going to cause an accident because they're going too slow or too fast. I mean, for me, it's the most stressful thing. It's probably the most stressful thing that I do here is drive on the Autostrada from time to time. I mean, I've got a death grip on the wheel. I'm trying to do a reasonable 130, maybe 140. And again, there's always someone on your ass screaming at you to move over. Or you're always coming up behind somebody who clearly should not be on the Autostrada to begin with. So if the cops could just set up there, not only would they impact road safety, they could also write as many tickets as they want. And, we all know this is partially about funding the budget as well. The Autostrada is where the money is and where the opportunity to save lives is, not in city traffic.
Deal with inflation as well. I mean, you start kind of, really dishing out loads and loads of fines.
No, I mean, I joke about it, but it's just, I don't know how there isn't just a nonstop streak of blood-drenched asphalt everywhere. I mean, I just look at it, I'm like, how do you not all kill each other constantly every day on this thing? It's unbelievable. Again, zero police presence. They should have a dedicated arm of the police that manages the highways, that just drives, just their presence alone would be enough to make people slow down, right? And not drive like an idiot.
This is nearly 20 years ago, but I spent several weeks driving around France on my own, in especially like avoiding actually the motorways and sticking to the more kind of, should we say, scenic routes. One of the things that really, really struck me, and it's an interesting thing, it actually kind of it highlights something that's often misleading about the way statistics are compiled or used or presented or whatever, and is that every single country road that I drove along in France, you would see some little, like small black wooden cross by the side of the road with a few kind of like wilted plants around it because, some local had maybe had a few too much to drink and then kind of careened into someone who was perhaps minding their own business. France, of course, is a very, very large country. It's the biggest country in Europe. It has the same kind of population as the United Kingdom, which means that people are very, very thinly spread out. So statistics for a country like France tend to look quite favourable. But I think if you live in rural France, then the roads are lethal. Well, to the extent that they are in this country, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there are some similarities, maybe some apples and oranges as well, because I think the big problem here on the rural roads is the lighting. The lighting is shocking here. Actually, the lighting is missing on the autostrada. There are huge stretches of the autostrada where the only lights come from your own headlights, which is weird. You would think the autostrada would be lighted
for me, that's
everywhere.
I mean, a lot of the motorways in the UK outside of cities are not lit. And I mean, actually, that's become more of a thing in, well, actually, I can't speak for the last 10, 15 years, but it became a thing that they were partly, I think, for complaints about light pollution when it was all these yellow sodium lights everywhere. And so they would actually get switched off, except for, busy junctions and things like that. But yeah, I'm kind of familiar with driving at night without.
Well, I for those of you who are listening, and if you've never had the chance to drive in Poland, on the one hand, I encourage you to have a drive on the autostrada. On the other hand, I don't want to be responsible for some horrible tragedy in your life. So I don't want to encourage you at the same time. But anyway, just take my word for it. This is not like driving on some... But back in Florida, we have Interstate 75, big, nice, 4 lanes in both directions. It's huge. And here, it's just a little bit different. But anyway, let's move on. In the time we have left, a few things on the lighter side. Actually, 2 things on the lighter side and one kind of interesting article that I noticed this week. We've mentioned several times on our program here about the rising frequency of private student dormitories in Poland. This is very much a thing now. 15, 20 years ago, the standard university student experience here involved living in a school dormitory, which in Krakow, rather, most of them are focused in a handful of places around the city, the most notable of which is a place called Miasteczko on the west side of town, where I'd say, 12, 15 or more academics dormitories are concentrated in the same place. There are some others in various places in Nowa Huta. There's a couple out there in Kordvanov, but again, mostly in Miasteczko. But over time, as the economic prosperity has increased, the people have more money, it became more and more common for university students to rent an apartment, either for themselves or together with 2 or 3 friends, or the family would buy an apartment for them. Or what we've seen in the last couple of years is, again, these arrival of these buildings that I mentioned. These are private, for-profit operations. The company will renovate typically a fairly large property and rent the individual rooms out. Same idea as a dormitory, just privately run. And we saw this week in the news that one of them, I think the name is pronounced Live-in-X, something like that. It's in Zabłacie. It's on Romanowice. Right across the street from Mayor Majchrowski's private university, right across the street from tons and tons of nice apartments, kind of hipster central over there. It's a big building. It used to be called Telpod until about 5 years ago. It was this huge warehouse dated from the 60s, crumbling basically. Very atmospheric inside. I remember going inside many times, but today it's this student dormitory. Anyway, we learned that the police are called there on a regular basis for violations related to what they call cicha nocna, the limit. I think it's 11 o'clock at night, after which you're supposed to be quiet and let your neighbors sleep. And the people who live across the street from them in these nice new apartments that cost a lot of money, they're pissed off that they live so close to all these students who are ruining their peace and quiet. Josh, do you have any sympathy for Hipster Central and their complaints about I was going to say rich kids. That's probably a bit of a stretch. Not everybody is necessarily rich in these private dorms, although they probably do, on average, they're better off than the average person in the country. But do you have any sympathy for people who can't sleep because they're too close to the students?
Well, I do have a little bit, because I think there's I mean, I've seen video. People have, been like leaning out their windows and filming some of the goings on in the building opposite. And I mean, it is fairly egregious behaviour, isn't it? I mean, it's like not just all night parties, but parties that seem to go on for sort of several days. And
that's what these people tell the cops. It's like all week. It's like a Friday to Monday thing.
And I mean, like when the cops say that they're being caught, I mean, they're like it's like 2 times a week, every week, like all year round. And I mean, it's, they're saying, oh, well, no, mumble. But, I mean, it's difficult to know what to do, really, because, with whom does the responsibility lie? I mean, arguably it's with the owner of the building, but I mean, when you have students, I suspect kind of a chunk of these students are not even Polish, so, they can like disappear out of the country, leaving behind unpaid fines or damaged, it's, you can't deal with it, can you?
I think the timeline is important here, and I say that because some, maybe even most of the apartments in this neighborhood were there before Live-In-X.
Ah, right. Yes.
But some are built after. And I mention this because this reminds me of something, of a situation that's kind of closer to where I live. I live close to Toron Arena. And you might know that, tons and tons of new apartments built in that area in the last few years. The arena was there before most of them. And the arena has this massive LED light display board. I don't know what to call it exactly, but look at marquee
to its function, isn't it?
A marquee thing. It's huge, and at night it lights up the sky. And plenty of people are complaining that they want the arena shut down, or at least to turn off this light because they can't sleep. The light comes in their windows. Okay, I get that. But I also get the fact that you bought an apartment across the street from this arena with this massive LED light display on it. What did you expect? Again, like the people who buy a house next to the airport and say you need to turn those planes off. Okay, I get it, but you knew what you were getting into, right? And so I kind of think some element of that applies to the situation. If you moved in across the street from this huge, and it is huge, this huge private student dormitory, what did you think it was going to be like?
Well, that's a very, very good point, and I have to agree with you on
But again, that's not always the case. There are plenty of apartments that were there first, and so I don't know. And on top of that, I have spoken. I'm not a big fan of students. I've said this before on our program. Sorry. You go to school for free. You get paid to go to school, actually, in many cases. Your biggest worry is which party you're going to go to in your nice, and I've seen this place. It's a very nice place. The gyms and the pools and the saunas and all this stuff. I mean, it's nice. So call it jealousy if you want, and maybe it is, but I'm not terribly sympathetic to you if that's your biggest problem over there in Live-In-X. But it's a mess. I'm glad I don't live there. I have no definitive answer on this one either. So tough. This is one of those not my problems, I guess. But anyway, could be coming soon to a street near you. I think we did talk about this. I think I mentioned about a month ago in the news that they were building one of these, actually not really close to me, but close enough, on a street called Sistersów, which goes between Mogilska and Aleja Pokoju. They're building another massive private student dormitory on that street as well, and so look forward to a similar situation over there soon, I'm sure. Another thing on another piece of news on the lighter side. Oh yeah. 4 asses in the Rnek. This was, the news item was posted on New Year's Eve, so it happened either that day or the day before. Apparently, the security monitoring in the Rnek was, I guess, it pans back and forth, and it landed on the side of 5 guys, one taking a picture and 4 guys, let's say, posing for the picture. They were leaning on one of the Christmas light displays with their jeans or whatever pulled down, their asses to the camera for, I guess, what is apparently a traditional holiday photo snap from somewhere. The cops, watching this on the monitoring, went out and arrested them, ticketed them. No word on how much the ticket costs for bearing your ass in the Rnek. I would like to have seen. Oh, sorry, my mistake. Altogether, 1,200 zlotys, so 300 zlotys each.
Yeah,
it's kind of a bargain, actually, to get a picture of your ass for 300 zlotys. Why are we cracking down on drivers when we're not cracking down on ass flashers? That's what I want to know.
Well, it's probably a lot. It's probably a lot easier to crack down on arse flashes.
1,200 zlotys for 4 asses. And one last thing. Speaking of fines, no word about asses in the story, but we learned this was last week. Poor guy. What was he thinking? He was on a bus here in Krakow. He was on a bus.
Oh, right.
And on Andersa, which is over there in Nowa Huta. And surprise, ticket inspection, please prepare your tickets. And the guy apparently panics. He forces open the door on a bus, which is not easy, by the way, because those doors are closed pretty firmly. He forces the door open, jumps out into the road. Thank God wasn't hit. And was ultimately caught anyway. How panicked do you have to be to react like that to a ticket inspection, Josh?
I have to say that was like, I mean, in the article I saw, whichever newspaper it was online, what kind of amused me as much as anything was the comments underneath. Because I mean, I don't know if all our listeners are aware of this, but the slang term for ticket inspectors on the buses and trams is Canaries. And if you're not aware of this, it can make the comments seem a little baffling, but. They're like kind of, well, like Canaries are really like the Gestapo, and so you can kind of sympathise with the poor guy. And of course, as you're constantly complaining about the cost of public transport,
yes,
in the ever increasing cost of public transport. So he was probably a poor, hard-working guy who just, was short of a bob or two, and
yeah, but I have to check on this because I don't know what the current situation is. I'm pretty sure.
They said they are attending to him in hospital.
if you're caught without a ticket, you get the ticket and you have X number of days to pay the fine at a discount, I think.
Yes.
And it's in the neighborhood, I want to say 150 for some reason. It could be less than that. The discount plus the value of the ticket that you should have had. And even at full price, what is it, like 200 zlotys now, 220, something like that? Okay, that's not, that's a lot of money. All right, fair enough. But I just don't see how forcing the door open is the solution here. I don't think, because at that point, I think the bus driver is obligated to slam on the brakes, obligated to call the cops. Maybe apparently an ambulance came. The fire department came to take care of this guy. I mean, you're going to attract even more attention by trying to jump out. So,
well, yeah, I mean, it is possible that he didn't think it through.
Seems that way. It's been a while since I've been caught. On public transport without, I've been caught. It's been a long time since, because I used to, we've all been there. I'm only going to be on the tram for a stop or two. What's the point? Let's see if I can. And sometimes it blows up in your face. But the one time that I remember, this might be the last time it happened to me. I don't remember, but it was on Lubitsch here in the center of town. And I saw the two guys get on, and one of them was finishing a beer as he got on the tram.
Oh, fantastic.
Which stood out in my mind. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, this guy's drinking a beer on the tram. Okay, big deal. Well, the doors close, and they flash their badges. The same guy who just finished a beer, I swear to God, starts checking tickets. The other guy comes up to me, he says, where's your tickets? I don't have one. And he starts giving me the speech. I said, you know what? Your friend here was finishing a beer as he got on the tram. Why don't we talk about that? And he looked back over his shoulder. He kind of paused for a second. And he just kept walking. He left me alone. So
right.
Yeah.
Results.
So I got lucky there. But I think I got fined once. I've been fined once because I had to go to that office. It's here in Kazimierz. It's on Wawrzynce.
That's right. Yes.
The MPK office to pay my fine. I forgot.
I don't know if I mentioned, but I mean, I recently proofread the English version of the entirety of the public transport network's regulations. So,
are they getting new regulations finally?
Well, I don't know, but I think that, theoretically, I mean, and I've not checked this, but it should mean that when you read the English version, it does actually make some kind of sense.
It's been years now, but I remember like standing behind the driver on a tram or a bus, and they had it kind of, it was like a big sticker stuck behind the driver.
Like, don't talk to the driver.
And there was a list of people who ride for free and of people who ride for discounts.
Oh, yeah.
And the first one listed among the people who ride for free were parliamentarians. I always thought that was a curious way to start the list. Like the people who, the highly paid government officials can ride for free. Oh, thanks a lot. Fuck you.
Your name is Oliver Cromwell.
And then after that, it was your blood donors and your blind people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I always thought that was weird. The parliamentarians were first. But so apparently there's a new list of regulations now.
Yeah, it's not like that anymore. And I mean, it is a bit more. it's a bit saner. I mean, it's more like what you'd expect to see anywhere in the world, really.
Well, tickets and asses in the Rnek, and what else do we talk about? Speeding tickets and dormitories and coronavirus and football coaches, et cetera, et cetera. That'll do it for this very first news episode of 2022. Thanks for listening. Please keep your fingers crossed for Dr. Mike. He's suffering through lots of cocktails and DVD sessions. It's not DVD.
Indian takeaways.
Who watches DVD? Netflix sessions and just hanging out. So let's all wish him the best as he tries to suffer through another day of that. Hopefully he'll be back with us next week. Best of luck to him. Fingers crossed for President Duda as well. Everybody who's got corona, get well soon. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the KrakCast.